Dear friends, welcome to the Summary Club, the channel of training and self-development. Today we would like to tell you probably everything about Yuri Dud, namely a short, but interesting and not boring biography of Yuri Dud. As you know, probably the most famous journalist and interviewer of Russia today, and indeed of the entire post-Soviet Russian-speaking space. We of course, as always, wanted to make a short version of some longer video for you in order to save your time, but unfortunately, it turned out that an interesting, more or less complete biography of Yuri Dud and a review of the last years of his life and work, hardly ever. Therefore, this time we will take the liberty and write our version by studying in detail all the main videos and printed sources on this matter. So, today it will really be interesting and exclusive to close once and for all questions about who is Yuri Dud and his YouTube channel Dud in fact. And the main thing is why the ratings of almost every interview with him on YouTube beat all conceivable and inconceivable values, reaching tens of millions of views in the first days after publication. So sit back, buckle up, and we begin. Well, we don't start from the beginning, but from Yuri's favorite question to almost all his guests. How much? How much do you earn? As you probably already guessed, Yuri himself does not like to answer this question. Therefore, there are many who want to penetrate the veil of knowledge about his income. For example, the online edition Commerçant asked the advertising agency Salo to analyze the blogger's income from advertising. The undisputed leader in this rating was, of course, Yuri Dud himself. If we take into account other types of his activities, after all, he is also the most popular and charismatic host of corporate events in Russia, and one evening with him will cost you hard cash, about 1 million rubles. He also conducts conferences and training workshops, a page on Instagram. Of course, he acts in advertising himself, and all this taken together brings him income, according to experts, about $1 million a year. And by the way, according to the Forbes Russia magazine published on the 27th of October in 2020, in the rating of YouTube stars bloggers, Yuri Dud was in a solid 4th place. But let's go back a little to the past and try to track down a few of the most remarkable facts of his biography, because I hope everyone is interested in how this all could have turned out and how you can become from an ordinary, constantly ill teenager the most famous interviewer and blogger in Russia already at such a young age. And so Yuri Dud was born on the 11th of October in 1986. The feature is added by the city of birth Potsdam, which was at that time on the territory that does not exist in our time, the German Democratic Republic. And again the feature, as in the joke, he was born on a German ship under the Russian flag in the territorial waters of Ukraine. What in practice means that he was born in Germany, Russian citizenship, but at the same time he is Ukrainian by nationality. An unusual combination of circumstances, isn't it? Although since he has been living in Russia since the age of 4, he still considers himself Russian. Yuri's father is a military man, currently the head of the military department of the Moscow State Technical University, named after N.E. Bauman. And his mother is a chemistry teacher at a technical school. One of the sites has information that the parents worked on the other side of the Berlin Wall. And when the wall collapsed, the Dud family returned first to Ukraine and then moved to Moscow. But Yuri himself adheres to exceptional anti-militarist views, which means that he is against any war in any of its manifestations. From an early age, Dud's biography began with the fact that Yuri's health did not work out. The diagnosis, bronchial asthma, which was deadly at that time, did not allow him to play his favorite football. And Yuri found an alternative: to write articles about sports and the same favorite football. Some sites and videos claim that Yuri began writing corny because his family didn't live well and he needed a banal part-time job. Maybe so. It is not for nothing that they say, the dashing 90s. Maybe they encouraged me to take up a business which in the future will determine the main profession of Yuri Dud. In general, at first he wrote for youth publications, one of them was Yunishskaya Gazeta, and by the last grades of school he had already taken the barrier even to the official newspaper Izvestia. Although, having entered the faculty of journalism at Moscow State University, he will already take barriers even higher. And in parallel with his studies, he will have an interesting job in the publication called Today, on the Radio City FM, and the TV channel NTV. And the topic of sports still remained relevant for Yuri. At 18 in 2004, he will cover the Summer Olympic Games in Athens, and 3 years later he will become a journalist for the monthly Pro Sport. In the same year, a year before graduation, he will propose to his future wife Olga Boneva. According to Yuri himself, He chose the most expensive restaurant for the proposal, but it turned out to be a place where silicone girls met with foreign businessmen. In general, from the experienced horror, the couple had a quick dinner, ran away from that restaurant, and Yuri made his proposal somewhere in the alley on the most ordinary bench. And yes, Olga's love turned out to be higher than the gorgeous proposals, and they became a happy married couple. Olga was also a student at Moscow State University, studied at the Faculty of Foreign Languages. Yuri calls his wife an intelligent and loving woman who is sympathetic to his work, and sometimes she herself takes part in the filming. And in 2008, the couple had a daughter, Alyona.
Subscribe to the Summary Club and watch short versions of the most popular and useful videos every day.
Further, from 2011 to 2013, having come close to his dream, Yuri became the host of the TV program Bump with the Head, of course, about football, and most importantly on the TV channel Russia 2, recognized in the sports theme of the 2010s as the most daring and stylish program. At the same time, to a large extent, this was facilitated by the charisma of Dud himself as a presenter. Also, in 2011, when he was only 24 years old, he took up the post of editor-in-chief of the internet portal sports.ru. And in 2012, the happy couple had a son, Daniel. But the main thing is that never stopping at what has been achieved. In 2014, Yuri registers his channel, Dud, on YouTube. But probably the main work did not allow starting the promotion of a personal brand on YouTube at that time, since in 2015 he also became the host of the Match TV sports channel, and in particular the Cult Tour program. And although the Russian national football team had nothing to boast about, this program still aroused high interest and warm approval from the audience. And in 2016, Yuri Dud and co-host of the program, footballer Yevgeny Savin, became laureates of the GQ Person of the Year award in the Face from TV nomination, although Yuri Dud twice more after that, in 2017, and in 2019 he became the winner of the GQ Person of the Year award in the Screen Face nomination. But having lost the main sponsor in 2017, the Cult Tour project was closed. And Yuri actually devoted the freed up time, finally, for today already well-known channel on YouTube. And so, yes, it was in 2017, at the heat of Yuri Dud, that the first interview with Asta, one of the founders of Russian rap and generally a well-known creative personality with many components, was published. At the very beginning of this interview, the jingle Yuri Dud, which was remembered by many thousands of audiences, already sounds, and only then straining questions about drug addiction, income, expenses and of course the conflict with debts. Ask why there are many thousand audience if the channel was still completely new at that time? Yes, because the video has gained more than 100,000 views per day. So the channel eventually waited for its ideal finest hour and got a very successful start, and its creator, full of new ideas and perspectives, set off on his fascinating journey on the following interesting topics and human destinies. Well, later in 2018, Yuri naturally on his own initiative leaves the ranks of the sporns.ru team and gives all his strength to the channel. Indeed, among the people who gave him interviews, there are already actors and musicians, directors, film critics, politicians and public figures, officials and businessmen, bloggers and many others. And for each of them, he found interesting and sometimes uncomfortable questions, making his interview original, unusual and even exciting, which was previously a rarity for the interview format. Indicative in this regard is Dud's interview with Nastya Vleva, where questions were asked about her intimate life with LJ and also the number of centimeters that she considers acceptable for a real man, which then, as you know, were discussed for a couple of months in almost all blogs on the Russian language internet. Well, Yuri himself, who knows how and loves to lead the stars to such revelations, while on the contrary very carefully protects his family from reporters. Neither he nor Olga even post family photos on social networks at all. Only the tattoos on the hands with the names of the children speak of his family life, which by the way causes ironic remarks among many, such as, "I made a cheat sheet. If because of work he forgets the names of the children, then you can always see on it." By the way, his children are also involved in sports. Alyona is engaged in gymnastics and dancing, and Daniel is engaged in football. On vacation, the family of Yuri Dud loves to travel to Ibiza, and from Yuri's musical hobbies, ska punk can be distinguished. His favorite bands are Goldfinger and Ska P. For cars, according to Yuri himself, he does not feel much passion and does not understand at all how it is possible to drive a car in a big city with its many kilometers of traffic jams. He, oddly enough for such a star, really just rides the subway. But the family still has a car. Yuri's first car was a Citroën C Picasso, which he had to part with after an accident in 2014. Resuscitation of the car was then impossible. Therefore, the next was the Opel Meriva, and in 2018 it was replaced by the Hyundai Santa Fe. Now Yuri Dud's channel has over 120 videos, and all of them have multi-million-dollar views. Yuri asks about everything, about politics, about faith, about something personal. In general, it is real about everything that is interesting to him and the audience, and even about what they cannot ask about in similar programs on TV. Yes, sometimes these questions are inconvenient. They overstep the lines of business ethics and standards of decency. But this is precisely the basis of his success, because often this is exactly what a wide multi-million-dollar audience wants to hear on YouTube. True, recently Yuri Dud has moved a little from just interviews with interesting people. He often makes documentaries on acute social topics. Also, he published stories about Kamchatka and Silicon Valley, about Kolyma and Beslan, about Russian Zambia and Russian Hollywood. But a film about the HIV epidemic in Russia attracted special attention. They even say they watched him at a meeting of the State Duma. At the same time they approved and promised to take action. As RIA News reported, First Deputy of the State Duma Health Protection Committee, Fedot Tumyasov, invited Yuri to a roundtable on measures to prevent the virus, and the head of the accounts chamber, Alexei Kudrin, promised to check the effectiveness of measures to organize medical care for HIV-infected patients. In general, apparently taking into account his fame, responsibility and demand for a multi-million audience on YouTube, Dud began to prepare in more detail the materials he submitted on topical issues of the state and society. The only drawback is that this approach led to a decrease in the frequency of new videos on the channel. Another important fact is that the severity of the problems raised by Dud leads to his frequent criticism from the pro-Kremlin publications, because often on his channel he openly discusses and even condemns the existing policy in the country and even the president of Russia himself. Often they even asked provocative questions to their guests about what they would say if they met Vladimir Putin in person. At the same time, of course, he often invites specifically for such criticism various opposition members of the current government, including the most famous of them, as you know, Mr. Navalny, whom they even say was forbidden to be invited to any discussion on TV. But Yuri, by the way, invited him to interviews whole 2 times, which is a big exception to the rule. Well, as they say, what you can't do in order to somehow try to fix the situation with corruption and other troubles in Russia, which undoubtedly exist, especially after the poisoning of the same Navalny, and with the real chemical combat poison, as well as his investigation about Putin's palace, which has already been watched by more than 120 million people, breaking all existing YouTube records for such programs. Actually, we too, as a channel for training and self-development in the Summary Club are engaged in similar projects and bring knowledge to people, only not from a journalistic point of view, but rather we prepare short versions of these videos and interviews for you, from which you can get acquainted with the entire content of 2-3 hours films, thereby greatly saving your time, but staying in the crown of the latest events in society and politics. Actually, something like this video, which I hope was useful to you about blogger Yuri Dud and his projects, which can really be talked about for a long time. After all, he is really praised and scolded, he is admired and argued about. Yuri Dud is undoubtedly a unique and extraordinary personality, an interesting journalist, an exciting and professional blogger, and just a good person in our opinion. Actually, therefore, we will also continue to follow Dud's biography and his really socially useful activities, including making short versions of his interviews and journalistic investigations. So, look at the links in the comments and our other extracts about Putin's castle and interviews with Navalny after the poisoning, as well as expect other videos very soon, and of course analyses and short versions of books, as well as advice from many other prominent personalities of the past and present at our channel. See you soon, friends. And friend, don't forget to subscribe to the Summary Club for becoming more successful, educated, kinder and wiser every day. Save hundreds of hours and dollars spending on boring regular education. Feel free to write your opinions and questions about each video. We read all the comments. In addition, go to our official website where you can find reading materials or watch other videos on channel and links in the description. All the best.